Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show, our Tesla Roadster version podcast this morning. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning. Welcome, everybody.
So the image behind us is a AI generated image, and the prompt basically said, "Give me a 2008 Tesla Roadster on a stretcher in a hospital setting in an emergency room." And I think it did a pretty good job. Now, Mark did point out some anomalies here.
Well, the main one I saw that I thought was kind of humorous is you look at that guy that's front left of our screen.
Uh,
He's got his arms crossed like this and looking intently, possibly across the way at the heart monitor. And there's an IV with like a blood or some red liquid coming down out of it, and it seemed to just kind of disappear as it goes into his arm. But he's
yeah.
one of the medical people, not somebody who needs the life support.
Right. You would think that that would have been something the Roadster would have needed. But the reason that we went with this theme, by the way, is it occurred to me the other day as we received yet another brick Roadster that needed to go on life support immediately, that we have a lot of medical metaphors in our business.
Yes.
Intravenous, we inject electrons into these cars. Life support, at the instant they arrive, we all scramble, and you see our engineers and technicians basically replicating what you see here in this triage center here or in this emergency room, in that we realize that this Roadster is dying.
Mhm.
It's in cardiac arrest, and we need to take quick and measured steps in order to preserve its life. So I thought that would be a good theme for this podcast. We can talk about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and start there. Um, so what typically happens to a Tesla Roadster that's in cardiac arrest is the charging system fails, and sometimes it's the charge cable. I had one of those this week as well, and out on site, the yellow charge cable failed, and it was the only one the customer had. So we immediately dispatched a replacement and to keep the car alive.
Yep.
And then we get the old charge cable back, and we completely rebuild that MC120, which is the yellow charge cable. We put a 10 gauge wire on that instead of 12 gauge, which is good for 30 amps now. We put a 25-foot cord, so you eliminate extension cords. 12 feet may not be long enough in a garage. And we rebuild the connectors themselves, or the main, the Type 1 charging connector that's proprietary on the Tesla Roadster. So that's one reason that these cars get bricked or run into trouble. The second one is a cell goes resistive. And it doesn't happen often, but it happens.
Yeah.
And you have to consider that these cells have been in there oftentimes for 16 years. And eventually, one of 6,831 says, you know what? I've reached the end of my life. I'm going to start going resistive, and I'm going to become parasitic, and I'm going to suck the electrons out of my fellow 68 cells in my brick.
And isn't that what occurs when the polarity of one cell can potentially reverse, so that instead of being able to give energy, it's just always drawing energy?
It has to get, down below 0 volts in order for that to occur. And typically we don't get them in that kind of condition or that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Got one from the Cayman Islands, for example. This particular brick was down to 0 volts. And the rest of the bricks in the car seemed reasonably healthy. So we ended up pulling out the sheet. We went right to that brick. And in this case, it has to happen quickly. We don't have the luxury of waiting and deliberating and going slow transport to try to get the best price. The faster that car gets here, the more likely it will be that we can save its life, or its ESS battery pack in this case. In this particular case, it was, again, one cell, and it was strange because this one was actually visible. There was a little bit of rust around the outside of the 18650 cell compared to all the others, which had no indication of that. And there was even a slight bloom on the collector plate, which indicates there had been some gassing that had been taking place.
Yep.
And you know what? Lo and behold, we were down to 10 millivolts, which is, you know, yeah,
Wow.
on that brick. All the rest were around 3.7, 3.8 volts. And as soon as we cut that one resistive, odd, rusty cell, the millivolts started to climb. And we were all cheering at that point in time, of course. By afternoon, it was up over 3 volts already. And then it went into the battery bunker. And that's where we do the risky charging. And from there, we let it trickle the entire weekend. Came in Monday morning and found that it had now balanced itself with the other bricks in that sheet. And we're continuing to work on that particular sheet. It's rare that you end up with with additional problems unless the low state of charge in that brick had been extended, a
Right.
couple 3 months.
Right.
This one apparently was short enough to where the rest of the cells were resilient enough to be able to feed that one parasitic cell, even though it got down to 10 millivolts in the brick.
Right. So even though the chemical degradation process may have started in that brick for those other cells, we arrested that degradation quickly enough that the cells were able to come back to life.
Yep. So the third reason that these cars oftentimes go into cardiac arrest, can't be driven, the ESS pack doesn't work, won't charge, if it's accidentally left without a charge. And you may ask, well, why would somebody do that? Well, here's some scenarios, very common actually.
Mm-hmm.
They go on vacation for a couple of months, and there's a storm that rolls through their neighborhood. It trips some circuit breakers, and the next thing you know, the car's not getting charged anymore because of a circuit breaker that blew. Or the Roadster went into storage, and I still don't understand why a company that is in the preservation business, storing exotic cars,
Right.
would not pay attention to the unique charging protocols that come along with a Tesla Roadster or any EV for that matter. More sensitive, of course, with the Tesla Roadster.
Of course.
We get a fair share of vehicles that come to us from exotic car storage facilities where the charging protocol was not followed, forgotten about. Classic example is Rafael de Mestre's VIN 687, the World Traveling Roadster,
Right.
which ended up being in a Munich museum for a year. People loved the car. They came to visit it, and the team that handled it for that first year did the charging protocols flawlessly. Then they asked for a 6-month extension, and the new team wasn't paying attention to the charging protocols, and VIN 687 got bricked. So it does happen at these locations, at these storage locations. And then finally, the fourth one is the car goes to a service center. Some deliberation ensues. Well, you've got a bad PEM. The PEM is going to need to be repaired. Let's see if we have one. And we'll quote you. In the meantime, the car's not getting charged.
Yeah.
The PEM is where the charging systems are. And sometimes the deliberation goes on for weeks or even months. Now, most service centers are very good about pulling the service plug, realizing that if you put the ESS pack into a coma so that there's no drain on that from pumps and 12-volt systems and door locks and security systems, everything that draws off 12 volts in that Roadster,
Mm-hmm.
that you have a very good chance that it can be revived once the technical problem is repaired. But the reality is that doesn't always happen. We have one in our service center right now. It came in, went on life support. It's been trying to rally now for 2 weeks, and we cannot get it above 235 volts. The voltage, string voltage, what we're talking about here is the big ESS pack, is normally around 400 volts DC. When the cars start getting bricked or the range goes down, or the state of charge goes down, that voltage begins to decline. Under 330 volts DC, the Roadster will no longer accept a charge from the Tesla charge port door.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that the pack is terminally gone at this point. It just simply means that the battery safety management system will no longer support a charge. And that's where we come in. We then feed electrons into the ESS pack, and if we can get it up over 330, 350 volts, then the Tesla Roadster charging system with battery safety management built in takes over again. And that's also a exciting moment in our shop when we have one that comes in dead, won't charge, and eventually reaches that state, and we begin to see that amber glow on that charge port door, and the Roadster's charging itself.
Oh yeah, that's almost like a recovery. You keep shocking somebody's heart, and eventually you see that monitor start
Right.
to beep at you again.
There's some cheering at that point. So when these cars come in, we do a number of things. They instantly go on life support, very much like this image that we are depicting here in a hospital emergency room. Laptops are deployed. Readings are taken with digital voltmeters to establish incoming ESS pack voltages. Um, we end up, treating these cars just like patients that are dying.
Hmm.
So we have some images here we can pop up, Jesse. We have such a volume at this point, image number 3383. We ended up designating a space in our large service center for strictly ESS pack battery work in various stages. And I'll describe what's going on here. Normally, we would drop a pack out of a Roadster underneath 11 lifts, and it would take up some space. And the car, of course, now is taking up space on that lift. Because of the volume we have, and you can see 5 of them here, there are actually 2 additional ones out on the floor. We ended up creating a special battery handling area in the service center to start to work on sheets, bricks. And what Scott's doing there on the right, he's actually taking readings to isolate resistive cells. And once he isolates that cell and then neutralizes it, that cart then rolls it into the battery bunker. And the battery bunker, there's a folder there, Jesse. We can take a look at an image there. And probably AA is the first one that we can look at. What we have here is a 40-foot sea container, basically a steel 8-foot by 40-foot sea container that's been built out into a battery charging lab. There are bus bars running down both sides of these benches that are supplying 50 volts DC to DC converters, and that's an image called 5As, Jesse, or a AAAAA. Cool names, right? He's shaking his head. Where do you get these, Pete? Try to keep them alphabetized. There we go. This is, by the way, our machine shop makes the plates for these for us. That's why it has Gruber etched into it.
Mhm.
And our strategy is that this is a sellable item for anybody that's doing, the type of work that we do. So this is a DC to DC converter that actually takes voltage from the 2 bus bars behind it, plus and minus,
Uh-huh.
and then allows us to dial it down to whatever voltage we need. In the case of a Roadster sheet, it's 36 volts. And then we can dial in the current that we want to feed into that, and it's limiting. It will never get higher than that. So there's a huge degree of safety involved in this process. And then, of course, it's fused and on and on. So that's what takes place in the battery bunker. You can see it a little bit better. Image AAA, Jesse. AAA shows the sheets or the modules. And the reason that we have 2 different sizes there is the first sheet that you see is a Tesla Roadster battery sheet with 621 cells.
Hmm.
The next 4 are Tesla Model S modules, they call them. They don't call them sheets anymore. Same thing. It's 22 volts instead of 36 volts. And those also have had work done for cell isolation and are now being trickle charged to make sure that they're stable before they go back in a car.
Does this trickle charging allow these to go, to the nearest hundredth of a volt, thousandth of a volt?
To the nearest hundredth of a volt and the nearest hundredth of an amp. So we can dial it down to 1 milliamp basically. Right. So that's the basic processes that we follow when these Roadsters come in. And let's go back to image 3383. I'll point out one more thing there. actually a couple. Being in the critical power world, by the way, between Mark and Scott, there is a tall standing box there.
Hmm.
That is a 48-volt rectifier, which is typically used in cell towers, telcos, central offices, for example,
Sure.
which run on 48 volts. And because we repurpose some of this equipment, this is this is now feeding the charging systems in this area, and it's able to supply the voltages and the current that we need to do multiple sessions like this in this battery area.
Which in this battery area is fantastic. I know that in this case, you're right. This came from a customer that was buying new equipment. We
Mhm.
brought it in, refurbished it, but rather than refurbish to resell, we knew that we had a need internally for it.
We refurbish to use internally, exactly. The gentleman in the middle is one of our engineers. That's Brad. And what he's working on is sheets that need rivets replaced. And we usually lay those down on non conductive surfaces and then drill out the old rivets while vacuuming and replace them with a torque settable hardware instead of a pop rivet, which is a far more effective way of connecting the bonding wires to the BMB cards.
Do you happen to know on these battery packs if if we've had more troubles on battery packs of first generation Roadsters, the 1.5s, in sheet one?
Oh, yes, because they didn't have a 12-volt battery in those
Exactly.
Roadsters, and all the work of converting down to 12 volts was being done by sheets 1 and 2.
Yes.
Um, we have not seen that, oddly enough, although Tesla did claim that that's the reason that they moved to a 12-volt battery, remember?
I do.
Yeah. This particular car that I was talking about, the Roadster that ended up with a bad brick, that was actually sheet number 3, I think, brick number 5,
Okay.
and it was a 1.5 Roadster. So, um, but that's the oh, one more thing on that picture, Jesse, that we can point out. It's repurposed equipment. In UPSs, oftentimes they have conversion transformers because it's a 480 volt input in the
Yes.
building needs to be dropped down to 208, or vice versa. The 208 needs to be upgraded to 480. So those little red stands there on rolling carts
Hmm.
are the transformer stands, and what we do there is we repurpose these, and rather than scrap the stands, we weld the wheels on them that were on the battery cabinets, good for 5,000 pounds.
Sure.
Those then become carts. As we pull sheets out, we can set those on that cart rather than having somebody do the heavy lifting and risk injury.
Ah, very nice. That's a great safety feature.
Yeah. All right. We have one TikTok question. Do you see any variation in build quality between early and late models in a production run? There are differences between the 1.5 Roadsters and the 2.0 Roadsters, yes. And the power electronics module, which is larger in a 1.5, actually does have some better construction in that they're using mil-spec connectors, the circular ones with the,
Right.
more waterproof. In the later version 2.0, they have some Molex connectors, 5 of them underneath the passenger side, underneath the PEM.
Hmm.
And those are not as robust or as weatherproof as the original mil-spec connectors on the
Very
1.5s.
interesting.
But they're trade-offs. The 1.5s run hotter, especially here in Phoenix as we're doing test driving. I'm driving number 349 right now. And if I'm not careful, I don't raise the trunk lid at home when I'm charging in my unair conditioned garage,
Hmm.
it will actually go into limp mode and affect the charging capability of the Roadster. So there were improvements, and yeah, so it's an upside and downside between the two.
Within the models themselves, though, in the 1.5 series and the 2.0 series, have you seen a lot of variation in the production quality?
The production quality was fairly stable in terms of the instrumentation, the interior trim pieces,
Right.
the fenders. Uh, it seemed like once they stabilized the design, they stayed with it. Even in the electronics, there's a switch pack in both the 1.5 and 2.0. Although they're not interchangeable, they look virtually identical,
Hmm.
and the failure rate on those is identical between the two different versions.
Very good.
The HVAC controller, much larger in a 1.5 underneath the hood
Right, right.
versus the 2.0. The 2.0 actually has a bit more problems in that there's a LED that is not waterproof. They drilled a hole, stuck the LED in there, and then parked it up underneath the hood vanes, which have large openings in them. So if you live in a wet climate, your HVAC controller can get compromised.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was a long answer to that question. I hope that answered it. Got another picture to throw up here, Jesse. And this one is going to be uh, here, VIN 149. We like to point out some of the sales, Roadster sales that have taken place, because a lot of people in the community are very much focused on valuation. This was a Bring a Trailer Roadster that initially was thought to have one of the original first generation R80 packs in it, which are somewhat flawed in that they don't last 16 years like the original pack.
Right.
It turns out that the pack was replaced in February, and the CAC indicated it was like 205, that this was a later generation R80 pack, none of which are currently having the same types of symptoms that the first generation R80 packs had.
Right.
To add to that, this pack being purchased in February of this year makes this a $43,000 battery pack. It's 40,000 plus tax,
Hmm.
depending on your tax rate. Could be as high as 44,000. So we were expecting, although it was higher mileage, 71,000 miles, which again, in the world of EVs is not that important. It is in an ICE vehicle where you have bearings that wear out and rings and pistons and exhaust and, fuel delivery and all that. 71,000 miles, in my estimation, doesn't make a whole lot of difference, but it seemed to have made a huge difference in the sale of this car. This car, despite having a $43,000 battery pack in it, and allegedly having over $10,000 in repairs done to it at a Tesla service center, sold for $66,000. Now you do the math on this, and we're talking about what, $11,000 car?
Yeah, the owner ends up with $11,000 of equity basically
Plus auction fees. Yeah, which
because they spent, you said $11,000 in repairs, 43 to $44,000 in pack. That's close to 55,000. Now you take off maybe 10% for auction fees. That owner is walking away with virtually nothing on top of the sale price.
no, one thing Bring a Trailer does is they keep the fees for the sellers fairly low, at $300 to $500.
Okay, well,
or
that
so.
is very helpful.
It's the buyer that ends up, paying for the bulk of the auction fees. But the reason we point these out is, again, it sets some sort of an expectation about what these cars can sell for, at least in this market. And
Mhm.
as we all know, these are screaming bargains right now. There is always an ecstatic buyer when something like this happens and a disappointed seller. But that won't go on forever. In the meantime, we've got a whole new generation of Roadster owners that are coming into the community.
Yeah, and that's just the first thing that we're seeing that we think is going to eventually overcome the momentum toward people selling roadsters. First, you've got a lot of new people coming into the market, and beyond the fact that there's only 2,000 or so roadsters on the road today, when that Roadster 2.0 comes out, currently slated sometime in 2026, I think that's going to spike interest for all roadsters, for all Tesla roadsters.
That's a good prediction. Yes, I agree with you.
When that happens, people are going to begin to see that, wow, I could spend $250,000 and get this really cool car, but I could also get a vintage, really cool car, same thing, Tesla Roadster, for a quarter of the price or just over a quarter of the price. And I think that's going to drive up demand and drive up prices.
As other car collectors have pointed out, there were other brands and styles of vehicle that didn't really take off until the new version came out, and that pulled the old generation vehicle up along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would not be at all unique.
So take heart. In the meantime, if you're looking for Roadsters, boy, this is a buyer's market. You can be selective because there are a lot of them for sale. Our Roadster matchmaking site, I think we've added 2 since the last podcast. We've got an image here, Jesse, VIN99. If you could pop that up. I posted this on social media on the Facebook Tesla Roadster Owners Group site, along with sending it to about 460 pre-qualified Roadster buyers. VIN99 here is a one of color. There are 5 green colors in the Roadster world. It's the most popular or the most painted color, I guess. There's Insane Green, Lightning Green, British Racing Green, Signature Green, and VIN 99 Green, which is this one. This is the only Roadster in this color. It is the same color as a 1931 Bugatti, happens to be in France. And it is a signature car. Sometimes a sale is dictated by circumstances, and this particular one needs to find a new owner. And anyway, if you're interested in what I would consider a highly collectible car, the reason is this has a backstory that includes Elon Musk. And if you're interested, go to our gallery section on our website, and it will tell you all about VIN 99 and how Elon was actually involved in bartering to get some lease space for their first sales and service organization. And this car was used as a bargaining chip.
Yes. Great story.
All right. We heard from Marco Nolte this week. And Marco, for those of you that may be unfamiliar, is a brilliant EV engineer who is in Germany and who's been working on the Tesla Roadster replacement battery pack. Made some progress. And he emailed me this week. Find my
information right there.
Here. Yep. And the email went something like this. And Jesse, if in the meantime you want to bring up the images that go with it, it's in the Marco's project folder, SC1. He says, here's some pictures from our first charging session at a Tesla supercharger in Germany. I was hoping to get a supercharger bill with a VIN on it, but the CCS2 ECU that I'm using doesn't transmit the VIN. So that wish needs to wait a bit until he can figure out a solution to this. Let's go to SC3. And there you can see the large connector that he has going into the supercharger. Yeah, you were there. No, that one right there. Is that as big as it? Oh, yeah, there we go.
That's such a cool picture.
It is.
You know, now granted, here in the States, you're not going to be charging into a supercharger on a Roadster because we don't have that DC to DC connection. But man, look at that. He's got that charger going in. It looks like a direction connection into the PEM where the DC AC to DC converter would have taken place.
And in the SC5 picture, Jesse, you can see the kW rate that he was injecting into this Roadster. There we go, 27 kW. And on the next image, SC9, you can see what the Roadster's reporting and seeing. Yeah, we can blow that up. There we go. 79 amps. And it looks like he's up to 382 volts.
Yes. And you know, you don't see 79 amps going into the battery for any of our chargers.
And Marco, I'm sure, is going to eventually make this work through the Tesla charge or the Roadster charge port. He and I were both collaborating on the NACS conversion for the Roadsters, even though we have scrubbed that project. I'll bet you Marco is not going to give up on it, and he's going to continue with it. But it would be cool to have just one charge connector on a Roadster that you could do both DC and AC fast charging.
It really would be. So it's love seeing the progress that Marco is making, and look forward to hearing more news about that in the future, hopefully in the near-term future.
And Marco does a pretty good job of keeping us updated. So as we get new information about his project, we'll make sure that we report on that. He's also solved some battery problems at this point, which indicate that there may be a product here fairly soon.
That's what I'm hoping. Just as we're getting ready to close, a couple of things on TikTok. SZGot says, love the color for the Roadster, the VIN 99 green.
Uh-huh.
Says, very nice, but he says the British green for me.
He likes the darker version of that. Yeah.
Yes. And I would say of all the greens, well, the insane green is my favorite just because it's so striking. But the British racing is the second one.
And he says, I'd love to stay and watch, but I have yet another Hemi to rebuild. Now, there you go. There's a man after my own heart. I'm
There
a
we go.
Mopar guy from the old days. Just one other thing that I wanted to cover was we do a lot of tech support, and it's free, literally free. You call us, you've got a problem with a Roadster, you need a log file analysis, we'll do all of that for free. And we oftentimes get requests from out of the country. This particular one was in Denmark. And the final version of this issue was, where do I go to get my Roadster repaired in Europe? You know, shipping one to the United States just is not cost effective.
Right.
So I wanted to talk about the great resources that the Europeans have and give some credit and a shout out to those guys. Chris Rosa is in Germany. He's in Karlstein, which is near Frankfurt. And he does batteries, he does recoveries. Currently, I believe he's working on expanding his shop.
Oh, fantastic.
Then we've got Evmix Nielsen. He's in Denmark. He's in Lejre, and I don't know how to pronounce that because I don't speak Danish. But that's near Copenhagen. So there's another good Roadster resource. Now, this is, of course, in addition to all of the Tesla service centers.
Right.
And many of the European service centers, they're still training their technicians. They are expanding the ones that allow Roadsters to come in for battery swaps. So you have a number of service options. Then we have Mars Orbiter, also in Germany. He's in Malsfeld, which is central Germany. And he probably has the largest shop of the ones that I'm mentioning here and has been doing it quite a long time. We partner with him in a variety of ways. He's the one that turned us on to the Intrax shocks for the Roadsters.
That's right.
He did a lot of the original engineering work with Intrax to make sure that the spring rates and all the rest of the specifications were as close as possible or even exceeded the Roadster performance.
That's right.
So he is in Malsfeld, central Germany. Then we've got Neil Wise. We're getting into the UK now. Neil has been around for a number of years. He's in Cullompton, which is west of London. And then there's also another UK service resource, Andy Nicol. He's in North Shields, which is south of Scotland. Some of the guys I'm mentioning don't do this full time. Okay, Mars is the only real full timer here that I'm aware of that is doing this. And then we have Marco Nolte, who we mentioned just a moment ago regarding these advances that he's working on in getting the Tesla Roadster not only DC fast charging, but also a replacement battery pack, an aftermarket version. And Marco is also in Germany. He's in Süßstedt, which is just which is on the north side of Germany near Hamburg, south of Bremen. So any of you interested in linking up with these companies, feel free to contact us. We can make recommendations and get you in touch with some of these other service resources.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We've reached our half hour. I'm Pete Gruber.